Hey, Steve Riley, welcome to Great Practice, Great Life. And today we're going to explore one of the interesting ways that you can grow your practice through niching. And so I have one of my friends, one of our adjunct practice advisors, apparently a recovering law clerk of mine, which we discovered later in life, John Tucker. So John, thanks for being here today. And thanks for sharing your story about how you niched your law firm. So welcome. It's great to have you here today.
It's great to be here, Steve. Thank you.
So let's talk about how you kind of got into this. So let's back up first. What is your practice and what is your niche and why would you consider it a niche? Like, let's just talk to people in a broad perspective about it. So then when we talk about how you ended up with this niche, they can kind of understand your story, if that makes sense.
Sure. Well, I'm a disability benefits lawyer. That started out doing disability insurance, and it grew to, at the time, Social Security disability and later veterans disability. So it was a niche because when I got out of law school, essentially no one was doing it. There were a handful of plaintiff lawyers around that handled the cases at all. I didn't even know it was a practice area when I was in law school, and there certainly weren't any courses in school then, and I'm not aware of any now, at least for disability insurance in any law school around the country.
Yeah, I can't think of a single one. So let's talk about this because you have built a heck of a practice. And while we're talking, why don't tell everybody the website, where you're at, the size of the practice, that kind of stuff. So
okay, I'm based in St. Petersburg, Florida. My website is tuckerdisability.com. The law firm name is Tucker Disability Law, PA. And we've got, at any given time, 15 to 17 people in the office. We make liberal use of law clerks, so that accounts for that change from time to time.
You probably have done much better with law clerks than I have. I'm just going to work with that assumption.
Well, having worked for you, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
So it's true. But I mean, that was like 100 years ago, and you were a fresh young guy. And I think you clerked for me for what, one summer? And it was
actually just a matter of a couple of months between the bar exam and getting a job in the fall of 1991.
Oh my God. We've gotten so old. Hard to believe. If you're talking to a young lawyer or who's trying to niche their practice, or a lawyer, because, right now this is you and I are beginning of the 2023. And one of the things you and I were talking about before the podcast was recession. And one of the things that happens to lawyers during a recession in large firms and medium-sized firms, regardless of their being partners or not, they get de-equitized and kicked out based on the revenue production. And you see this happen a lot. So there might be a lawyer listening to this going, okay, great. I've just been kicked out of the practice or fired or terminated or given a golden parachute. That's kind of not so gold. And I'm trying to figure out what to do with my practice at this point. So what would you tell someone who's looking to niche?
If you're trying to narrow down what you do to do what other people don't do, find something you like. In my case, I had wanted to go to medical school, and I end up in this disability field where a large part of our day in the disability practice is figuring out what is wrong medically with somebody. So it spoke to me because I enjoyed the medicine of it. I had to learn the medicine to understand what was happening to my clients, how the symptoms manifested in them, the limitations came about that restricted their ability to work. If a young lawyer was going out today and let's say they had an interest in firearms and they wanted to do Second Amendment law, there's not a lot of Second Amendment lawyers around. Now, there may be some, but if you find some area that you really have an interest in, that you want to devour up information and the law about, and you become the subject matter expert, you will easily become the go-to person. And that puts you in a position, particularly with something like Second Amendment law, it's almost recession-proof because there's always going to be problems there. The question is, will people be available to pay you a fee to handle the cases? And I think when people select what they do and they really focus down onto something that nobody else is doing, they put themselves in a fantastic position because they ultimately become, this is not meant to be sexist, the guy. The girl, the guy, whatever. In fact, I trademarked the ERISA guy at one point because people were calling me the ERISA guy. And I thought, all right, I'm going to go with that. That's fantastic.
I'll go with that. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you find that You find something you're interested in that nobody else is doing. You can put yourself in a great place because everybody's out there trying to get the personal injury case, the auto accident case, or they're trying to get the divorce or do the crime, whatever it is. If you do something nobody else does, and you're the first name that comes to mind because you're the only name that comes to mind, you put yourself in a wonderful position.
You set up your own practice, you started growing, it's you and two other people, but you started outsourcing very quickly at some point in time. Like when you grew your practice, you were one of the early adopters to outsourcing, going global. So let's talk about that for a few minutes, because that was a key element for your growth.
We were trying to figure out a way to scale, and I had created a new partnership. This was '05, so I'd been practicing, for quite some time at this point. So about 14 years, about halfway through my practice, I guess. I've been practicing now 31 years. We couldn't at the time hire staff, team members, to do things like get medical records, collect information from clients, track down earnings information. In a disability case, we need to know how much our client made. We need proof of that. We're always getting certain sets of information, like any law practice, but we couldn't find people locally to do it. And as it happened, my partner was friends with a guy who was the CEO of a publicly traded corporation that had started an outsourcing company. They actually called it nearshoring because they went to Central America. The big talk at the time was India. And we didn't necessarily want Indians on the other side of the planet with that time difference. We ideally wanted somebody who was more in our time zone. We're in Florida, so folks with an Hispanic accent wouldn't have been a problem because we hear that all the time where we live down here. And we had this opportunity to get 5 people to literally work for us at a call center in San Salvador, El Salvador. Wow. And it worked out wonderfully. Now, at the time, we got berated a bit. We were published in the local business journal and some things like that. And I will tell you, there were a lot of people that didn't think it was very cool that we were sending American jobs somewhere else. But my usual response was, well, when you stop driving that Mercedes and buying those Chinese appliances and other things, we can have a conversation about that. But it worked great. And my former partner had a commercial landlord-tenant practice, so very different than mine. And we were able to take a couple of those seats and put them into doing things like creating the notices and other documentation that had to go out in those cases. And the only thing you would have ever noticed if you ever called them to try to figure out that they weren't sitting here in St. Petersburg, at the time we were in Clearwater, right up the road, was that they couldn't give directions to our office.
Oh my gosh.
They were not able to guide somebody in who was calling saying, I'm at the light. How do I get there? It was fantastic.
Patrick is a practice advisor, which is a term we use for a coach or consultant inside of Atticus. And practice advisors really are just phenomenal. They have tons of experience. I think Patrick, I may be wrong, is 22 years doing this, 23 years, something like that. And he's like me, he's a recovering litigator. He spent a couple of years doing litigation before he joined Atticus. But he's one of the most sharp and experienced guys. He's really, really great. So how long did you work with Patrick? Or how long have you been working with Patrick?
Patrick and I have now been working together, I believe, since 2012. So 10 years now.
10 years, a good decade. So that's good. That's a good decade. That's a good thing. What's the benefit to you working with a practice advisor? Like, why do you do that? Some people would be like, "Were you kidding me? 10 years with the same guy? Why? Why would you do that?"
Accountability is such a huge factor in achieving whatever success you want to get to. So if you're me, you need somebody who's going to be there where you can say, I got this done, or I didn't get this done. And then they can say, why not? Let's get it done. I've actually had calls with Patrick before where I called him and he said, well, you were supposed to do X, Y, and Z for homework. And I said, well, I got X done. So you didn't get Y and Z done? No. Okay, well, let's hang up and you go do Y and Z.
I love that.
And so, and I'm going to at least get done what I had to get done. And if you learn over time, I'm making commitments and I've got to make myself accountable to myself so that if I do have an accountability partner, I'm just reporting success to them. I'm not calling them saying, oh, I fell flat on my face about this. But every now and then something happens in your practice where you want to bounce an idea off of somebody else, and you just want that objective view of what's going on. The other thing I have found is we can all be our own worst enemy, right? So you'll allow yourself to persist in some behavior that is not helping you. It's not good for you. You might do it out of loyalty to a friend or just desire not to do something. Terminating somebody is a really good example, and that happens in every practice. It's hard.
I don't know any lawyers that'd be afraid to fire somebody.
Right.
I can't think.
Well, and if you ever want to fire people and enjoy it, there's something wrong with you anyway.
Yes.
So, but having somebody who can step in and say, listen, you need to do this, and here's why.